Welcome back to a bevy of bloods for round 4 of the 2023 season. In this episode, we go into the heart-wrenching game against Port Adelaide, where not only did we experience the loss, but more importantly, we lost both McCartans to concussion. If you're hurt and you're not alone, there are plenty of emotions running around at the moment, and as Swans fans, we are all feeling it. So fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved bloods. Okay, Swans fans, I'm helped here to navigate this emotional game review with none other than the best. Welcome back, Stevo.
Thanks, Chris, for having me again 2 weeks in a row. Not a great result again, 2 weeks in a row, but I guess we've got lots to talk about, don't we? So
That's
yeah.
right. We've got plenty ahead of us here. So let's get stuck into it with the game details. Last Saturday, our Sydney Swans were defeated by the Port Adelaide Power by 2 points, with a final score of 9-10-64 to the Swans and 9-12-66 to the Power. Steve-O, tell me, what were your first impressions of that game?
It was rough, wasn't it? A good mate of mine is a Lions fan. He texted me straight after the game, and the text just said, "Are you okay?" And that,
Oh my
that sort of
God.
summed it up, didn't it? So thank you to
Yeah.
Grant for your care and solidarity. But like last week, I don't want to overreact. Hey, it's early in the year. We've only played 4 games. There's time to fix things. And I was looking at the ladder from last year, the 2022 ladder. Every single one of last year's top 8 teams has put in at least one bad effort in the first 4 weeks of the season. So, we've got a run of 4 weeks of tough games coming up, and that'll see where we're at.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think the first 6 rounds, we always considered to get a good indication of where we were. By the time we get back to the Cats to see what our record is and how we're playing, that was always the intention to get a good grasp of it all. But so far, it's been frankly disappointing in the last couple of weeks. We've beaten a couple of very easy opponents and won against them convincingly. And the ones that were competitive, we have really dropped off significantly. So I think a couple of points that I wanted to raise is that our halfbacks this week were really in the game, whereas last week before that, so against the Ds, we were kind of struggling a fair bit. They were getting around, but they just didn't really make too much of an impact, as in direct impact. But this week, very different. Ollie and Blakey were huge in the game, and Ollie gets himself some biscuits as a result of it. But then the other thing I wanted to kind of raise was the first quarter where we were taken off, and the third quarter where we kind of padded out to that. We were going to the good side of the venue. So the SCG Paddington end looked like it had a massive wind current across it. That was kind of stapled on by one of the goals from Port Adelaide. I think it was in the second quarter, where was aiming left and went well right. It was a pretty dire wind going on. I think that made a massive impact to what happened with Ollie as well. So, mate, it was a lot going on. We'll get to the big points as well, but let's tuck into the good, the bad, and the stats. What did you see on your side for any of those?
Number one good was how well the backline stood up. Hey, I mean,
Yeah.
your two key anchor defenders, the McCartan brothers, are both gone before half time, and the backline did a fantastic job, led by Dane Rampy, who had a really, really strong effort down there. So that would be number one. And then at the other end of the field, we got the ball inside 50 a lot. It was 67 to 45. That's plus 22 inside 50s to the Swans. That's a good effort to get the footy in there. We just didn't do anything with it in there. And part of that, which is, I guess, the next number that I've got, is Port did really, really well in their back 50. They made 24 tackles inside their defensive 50. They only managed 25 over the first 3 rounds of the season. The AFL average is just under 10. So that's a huge effort for Port to tackle inside their 50, and they marked a lot of our balls. We only took 9 marks inside 50. Port took 12, 13. I think that's what Longmire said in the press conference, 12 or 13. So they're taking more marks inside our 50 from our kicks than we are. So they were the numbers for me, I think, that jumped up.
Yeah, these are good numbers. I agree with all those. I think that was a big part of the game, that back line. Duursma from the Port was just on fire, taking some nice interceptions where, while Aaliyah and those other gents were kind of tracking onto the forwards. But our backs, like you said, did an incredible job to be down two key players in that line to still only then take the 9 goals all up. I mean, granted, 2 points went their way, and that was the difference in the game. But we were absolutely shaken. The timing of Fox coming back into the team as a sub was superb. I don't know what we would have done otherwise. We probably would have rolled Cunningham back or something and figure it out. But yeah, to have Foxy, a very established back in the team, just in time for the McCartans to both go out, was timely. And you never know, the scoreline could have been worse for it. But Rampy, I agreed, played a great game. He was pushing harder than anyone else on the field, and yeah, it's to see him struggling just to keep going, and also to cop a couple of pretty ordinary umpire calls against him, I felt was, just unnecessary evil added on top. The one point that Matt from our bevy raised was the goal accuracy from most of our forwards is pretty ordinary. Haywood, Heaney, Papley, Buddy, and Amati are all kicking underneath 45% goal accuracy. Not a great sign. You're not going to win too many games if your whole forward line is doing that. Logan McDonald is the shining light in that front line with 71% goal efficiency in front of goal. So with something there, that statistic just needs to climb by, say, 5-10% for each one of those, and we're winning games convincingly, or at least getting very close to a blowout game. But we're not going to win games if we're kicking, in the instance of Hayward, I think he's at 29% or something. So less than a third are going through the middle pipe. So fair bit to look at there, mate. The other one that I had raised was the missed tackles. From my eyes, and I'm yet to verify it, I can't find anything on AFL tables as yet, but the missed tackles on our side was just bad. The Port Adelaide power were finding ways around us. We're shaking off tackles. We're taking off 2-3 tackles at a time, or at least dodging a couple. Our guys looked a bit spent in the inside and just could not get those tackles down and could not get contested ball rolling, which arguably would be our backup plan to start rocking into that. So, yeah, not a fun time at all, mate. Any other points that you wanted to raise here?
I guess the other one, and this has been raised a lot, the whole of the start of this season, really, by the media and by Swans fans online, etc., is Franklin. I mean, he didn't have an impact, and
Yeah.
when he's coming up, like in the last, like this year, and also then at the end of last year in the finals, when he's coming up against these really elite key defenders, he's not really in the game like we might like him to be. Like the likes of sort of Steve May, Aliir, Wittering from Carlton, and when you look at the other teams that are expected to be contending this year, all of them have a strong defender who you would probably think is going to get the better of Flank, and so got to figure out what to do with him. We can probably talk about that a bit more later on.
Mm. Yeah, no doubt. Like, agree with that. Yeah, there's a fair bit of blood being asked for out there by Swans fans. Can we all just take a moment that if you're one of the people wanting to sack Horse and basically replace half the team, I would put to you that that's a bit of an overreaction. So
Yeah,
I
it's round
don't
four.
know.
It's round four.
Yeah, it's round
Mm.
4 of the 2023 season. We have a young team. We knew they're going to be a little bit inconsistent. So, on one hand of things, we can't assume that we're ahead of our development, and in the same hand, presume that we're ready to go. There's going to be inconsistencies. We've got a very young team in some very key places, and we may not be as sharpened as we want to be at this early stage of the year, and that's okay. It's a long season. It takes a lot, and we've just seen two of our key backs go down with concussion. We're going to miss them next week. How are we going to patch that up is insanely important. I tell you what, replacing half the team in Horse is not going to be the answer to it. So, yeah, anyone who's out there disagrees with me, by all means, shoot off that message. Go nuts, help yourselves. But I really don't see it being the key. So
Yeah,
I
and
just point that out, mate.
it's when you get a team too. Like I think it's one thing to look through the results and think, okay, this is who beat us and this is who we beat. But then a huge thing in AFL is like the mental side of the game and momentum.
Mm,
And this week we got a Port Adelaide. We didn't get the Port Adelaide that was pathetic 2 weeks ago. We got the Port Adelaide that had just been flogged mercilessly 2 weeks in a row, including on their home showdown. They had a coach under pressure. They had a lot to play for, and they came out to play. They played really hard, and the Swans played hard back. It was a tough game. Like it was a
mm,
tight game. It's a 2-point match. In the AFL, there's not a big difference between the second place team from last year in the Swans and what Port was 10th or something. There's not a big gap between those teams when one of them comes to play.
Yep, yeah, I think that's fair. And I think a lot of teams are playing consistent football across the board. You only need to look at the Cats, right, and them just flogging a VFL side in Hawks today. So there is not many teams that are a convincing win over everyone. The competition is tight. We saw that last year. We saw that the year before. If you don't turn up or if you don't take your chances, you'll be beaten by practically anyone in the ladder. So it is not a big surprise, I guess. There's many things we can talk about, but let's get into a couple of favorite moments and missed chances. Stevo, anything notable from your side on those categories?
I loved, and this one goes out to Jules because she's a big Logan McDonald fan. Jules from the Bevy group. Logan McDonald's big marking goal late in the third quarter to get us back ahead on the scoreboard. That was huge. No one was looking like
That was
taking
massive.
contested marking out. Every time we kicked it in there, Alir or someone else was just plucking it. And this one went in. Big Logan came up, plucked it, went back, calmly slotted the goal, and got us back ahead. That was a really good one for me. I liked that. I've watched the replay of that a few times. And then the other one was
I think it was a 2-on-1.
Yeah, he just came straight up and split them and plucked it out. It was good.
Yeah.
And then this is like a bittersweet one. But the 10 seconds at the end where I thought we'd won the game. That was good. that was amazing because I was watching it with a mate, and one of the guys from our footy team was watching it with him, and I've forced him. He's Brazilian, actually. Paulo, I'll say hello. He's a Brazilian fellow who's playing for our Aussie Rules team in Finland, the Turku Dockers, and I've decided that he's a Swans fan. I got him a shirt and everything, and he got me a Brazilian football shirt to swap. So we've swapped our teams, and he was watching it with me, and he was losing it, swearing in Portuguese at the screen, and it was a good 10 seconds. Then it was over.
Yeah, that was smooth. Like they there was no one in the back line, in the forward line for them anyway. Rampy grabs that, kicks it straight down the corridor, hits Heaney on the chest. Heaney sees Ollie standing there by himself in that pocket, gets the ball over to him, and it's up to Ollie to then finish it off. So let's get straight into that missed chance. The final kick, from my eyes, the wind was an enormous factor. Horse also mentioned that Ollie was doing enormous amounts of running in the last couple of quarters there across the whole game, I guess, and was likely really, really tired when he tried to boot that ball from about 50 or 45 or plus 45, somewhere there. And look, the way I see it, it didn't have the distance. Yeah, sure. We saw Millsy put up his hands and start celebrating. We didn't have enough people in that goal square. But we have the advantage of hindsight, and to me, it looked like he just wasn't going to carry. He's going to hit someone on the head anyway. So the kick needed to be big enough. That's the way I see it, mate. What is your take on it?
I agree, and you think of what Florence done, because I went back and looked at the replay to see, and he marked it about 45 out, which means he's kicking it from just inside 50. I mean, that kick into what looked like a bit of a wind after running your guts out for 2 hours of football is a hard kick anyway. It would have taken a particularly big kick to get it. And then, like you said, it looked like from the side on camera, it looked like it wasn't going to go anyway. Even one of the smaller players, like a Tom Papley probably would have got a fingertip on that because it wasn't going in high enough.
Yeah. No, I agree. It looked like it was just would have dropped, under 7 foot for sure. So anyone on a football field would have been able to put their hands up and stop it. I mean, we could have shepherded it. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. We didn't have enough bodies in that square. We started celebrating too early. We didn't make enough impact on those backs. If we'd taken a Lear out of it, was anyone else expected to kind of get through? I don't know. Hindsight's 2020, but the kick in itself just didn't have enough oomph, and I think a big part of that was because the wind. The wind really carried stuff, and it looked like a perfect kick too from the angle that they had. And it's the other thing. This is just a special bit of torture that sports and AFL gives you. It was kicked from pretty much the space where Buddy collected his 1,000 goal. That then kicked off an enormous celebration and probably the most iconic moment of the game in football for many, many years. And just to give it that extra bit of twist in the dagger in the heart, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, this is just mean. It was the meanest thing I've seen for a long time.
It was rough. It was rough.
God. Yeah. Look, all right. So I think we dump into with favorite moments and missed chances there. Obviously, the big one there is for Ollie. The other one is the way the McCartans went down. So we saw Paddy go down pretty early in the game to what looked like a nothing injury. His face kind of seemed like it skimmed off the grass, and before you know it, he was clutching his face. I thought that he got poked in the eye. That's the way that I saw it. And then, the next part was about 20 seconds later, we see some footage of him just shaking and barely able to get to his feet and clearly concussed or something along those lines. So at the pub, we're all like, is it concussion? Is it his diabetes? Could it be like his sugar levels are down and he's just kind of kicked in that moment? And we don't know. We have no idea. And we're like, what the hell are we going to do this? Practically in tears if he's going to be coming off the field for good. We might have seen the very last time Paddy McCartan graces a football field, the way that everyone's talking. Seems like the AFL might jump in and basically ask him to retire. That's the most heart-wrenching shit ever. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, watching on the telly, you just feel for him, for his family, like for all the club, everyone around the club, because you don't want to see that happen in sport. It's a dangerous sport that we play. We know that there's risk, but still, it doesn't prepare you to watch that sort of scene. And I just really, I don't want to speculate on it because, they'll make that decision when they're ready. Just hope that he recovers well, and his brother too.
Yep. Yeah, look, we're recording this on Monday night, Easter Monday. So the game happened on Saturday. We don't know a whole lot more what's happened since. So unfortunately, we have no news to break at this point of what is expected of Paddy. There's been a fair amount of knee-jerk reaction to his concussion and the way it looked. So we know, I think it's 9 concussions he had all up, which is what's kind of driven him to leave AFL the first time around. He got that position through his brother Tommy, and we've tried him out in the back line, and he was clearly very, very good and very natural and seemed to have beautiful skill sets that are just the nicest thing to see in that back line with some stuff that we needed. So we got given a year with him, and to see him effectively early in this year probably sit out a fair amount of time, I think it'd be fair. I think that's the least that they'll probably be doing, making sure that he's good, lots of scans, and probably have a good chat with him. I don't see him coming back very quickly. I don't know. It's brutal. Football is a brutal sport in so many ways, but he just wants to play football. But health comes first, and so we give him all the best. I don't know what else to say, mate. Is there anything you want to add to that before we probably get into it with selection further down in the potty?
No, just that wishing you well with your recovery, and however it goes, we just hope it goes the best it can for you. That's it, I think, for me.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's get stuck into the Bob medal. So it's our equivalent of the Bob Skilton medal. We give out 3, 2, 1 points to the best players in each game, with the highest points then receiving an all expenses paid trip to Finland to train the AFL community out there. So, Stevo, this is your initiative. I haven't crunched the numbers yet, mate, but what are you suspecting we should do there?
I don't think we agreed on all expenses paid. I think given the budget of the Finland Australian Football League, I reckon that we could probably shout you a few beers and a nice salmon dinner and a sauna. And if you could get yourself here, that would be wonderful. You can come by boat. You don't have to fly. There's cheaper ways to get here. You can either come by boat through Estonia or through Sweden. So it's not like you have to fly. I mean, you're going to have to fly to get out of Australia, of course. I mean, you could go boat via Malaysia, but that's probably a longer trip than you want to do in your 4 or 6 weeks of off-season. But the Turku Dockers, current reigning Finnish champions, will host you. We'd love to have you at a training session or a game, or if you could play for us in the grand final in October after the season in Australia is finished, would be very nice. we could use.
There's got to be some imports job, eh? All right, cool.
Yeah, we can loosen the rules on ring-in players, I think, just for one special appearance. If you bring a mate, I'll tell you what. If you bring another Swan with you, we'll put one of you on each team in the grand final. That's what we'll do.
Oh, fair. All right, good. All right.
That's the prize this week.
All right, good. Okay, I haven't crunched the numbers. One of the suggestions we had to try to make this as realistic as possible while within the Bevy's budget was to just put them on a Zoom chat and a treadmill inside of a freezer. That would have got us as close to finish weathers as we possibly could get it within our budget. So we're working within it. We can see what we can do. I'll crunch some numbers and we'll come back to you all. But let's get stuck into it. The 3, 2, 1 points go to 3 points to Ollie, 2 points to Warner, and 1 point to Laddams. Mate, do you want to kick off with Ollie and his great game?
He was great, and it was hard to split these two, wasn't it? Ollie and
Was.
Chad Warner. They both were amazing, and they're both young guys. Ollie Florent, he ran everywhere, didn't he? Like, he 33 touches, which was the most on the field, 24 kicks, and impactful quality kicks, 890 meters gained. So he's gained
Wow.
almost a kilometre worth of territory on the football field in a game. That's a huge number. And he just worked so hard, and he cuts lines, and every time he gets the ball, you think that he's going to like electrify something and get something moving. He makes good decisions. He had a fantastic game. One of the better games he's had for the Swans, I reckon.
Yeah, this season, whole season has been amazing. During the preseason review with Noddy, we kind of picked him up and suggested that, look, this might be his career year. He's at the great age. He's absolutely a veteran at this point. He's been there for so long. We're seeing great signs out of him. We need a lot out of him. And so far, he's practically been, in my eyes anyway, very biased. My eyes would be close to an AA selection, just how good he's been in that line. So yeah, to 895 meters, no, sorry, 890 meters gain. Just to give everyone a bit of context, second on the ground was Warner with 543. So that's, no, what's that? 350 meters extra that Ollie added on from his second place rival.
Whoa, that's a
Amazing. It's
lot,
an
eh?
amazing game. That's a lot. That's
Yeah, when
what,
you
that's
put it like
more than
that,
most we
that's a
scored.
lot. Yeah.
Unbelievable. It was the best game he'd ever played, I'd argue. And then, but of course, to see him just come up that extra probably 2 meters short in that kick to win the game for us, it was, what are you going to do? But no, it was a hard kick and he gave it a fair go, to be honest with you. And it was pretty damn straight given everything that was happening at that point. So 3 points to Ollie anyway. That was a tough one. It was not a tough one to give. I think he was well deserving of either the 3 or the 2 points. But the unfortunately does come with a bit of a caveat with that missed kick at the end there, basically not getting us up over the game. Mate, 2 points to Chad Warner. Chad's been back. He was a bit quiet early in the season, but he looks like he's starting to warm up again, mate. What did you see from Mr. Chad?
Especially in that third quarter, he just tore it apart. Like, he looked like he was going to be the difference on the field. The thing I
Mm,
love about Chad Warner is when he gets the ball in heavy traffic, he breaks out of traffic, he cuts lines, he straightens up, and he gets himself into a position very quickly where he's very hard to tackle. Um, and that goal that he kicked in the third quarter, I think, like towards the very end of the third quarter, where he gets it just around 50, he all of a sudden, like not all of a sudden, like straight away orients his hips towards the goal, and boom, and it's just a bullet going through.
mm.
And good luck stopping him when he's in that sort of form. Yeah, he was fantastic as well. Him and
Yeah,
Florent
both his
both.
goals were superb in this very similar ways. So kind of found himself a bit of space, running straight to goal, and slotting them from. I think the first one was from outside the 50. The second one was well inside, or maybe like 40 or so. But yeah, both very similar goals from pretty much the same place. He did that last year a fair bit and made everyone kind of pay attention to him. So yeah, he's starting to warm up, which is good to see because he's been a little bit quiet early in the season. But Warner's get up there again in the Bob votes, mate. I can't say enough about him. He's looking good and he looks a bit bigger. So hopefully that's going to help him shrug off some of those tackles coming on as we start playing some pretty big midfield. So good on Warner, mate. 1 point to Laddams, our sole ruckman. How did you see Laddams' game?
Yeah, he fought hard. I mean, it was a scrappy game. The thing I liked about his game this week was that he did quite well in the hitouts, but the really thing that I liked the most was that he won 7 clearances, which was the third best on the field, which
Mm,
which is what we want from the ruckman. Like, the ball's going to come to ground, and then if he can have an impact on the ground like he was, then that's really good. He had a few mistakes. There were certainly some things again that he would probably rather not have done in terms of turnovers and stuff.
mm.
But really, really good game from him, and it showed like he's developing. He's like a lot of these other young guys. He's still learning the game. Like, he's learning his position, and this is only his fourth week really being the top dog ruckman. And I think he's improved this week. It was a good effort.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's just been slowly progressing better and better every week. 25 hitouts, 28% to advantage, 70 contests all up in the ruck. As you mentioned there, 7 clearances, third on the ground, 5 inside 50s, and 16 disposals, with 13 of those being contested. So 13 of his 16 touches, that's about 80 something percent, are in the contest, as you expect him. He doesn't have a lot of time to make decisions, and he was doing a pretty good job. I recall that really lovely little depth kick that he put on from inside the square when he got touch of the ball, and then hit one of the wingers or the centers out in the wing just to kind of build some space with a really soft, beautiful kick that just landed it perfectly. So pretty happy with the way Laddams is going, to be honest with you. I think we had big hopes for him, and he's starting to kind of come through. And against his old mob in Port Adelaide, where he had a bit of a brain fade last year, got himself suspended as a result. And this year, they were right on him. You can see him with a little wry smile as they're all getting stuck into him. He had a great game as a result. It's like the things that he needed to work on have been worked on, and they're coming through. Pretty happy with his development. So 1 point goes out to the big man, Laddams. The good lad is on for this year. Mate, you had a point here about the clearances, though. One thing I want to flag.
With the hitouts, I mean, because Laddams had 25 hitouts, 28% of those were to advantage. The Swans won the hitouts overall because Joel Amati also had 9 hitouts. So the Swans won the hitouts 34-27, which is a clear win. But then we'd still lost the clearances, 36-41. Swans lost the clearances. So that's something that they'll definitely want to look at, because it's one thing to get your hand on the ball first, but what you really want is to be the one getting the ball out of there. And that's not happening. And with Laddams too, I think what we've seen is kind of what we expect from him. What we should realistically expect from him is that when he's against a ruckman who's not one of the top dog ruckman, he does well. And he did also against the Hawks ruckman against Grundy. Grundy gave him a pretty good run around the park. Witts had fun with him in the first game against Gold Coast, but it didn't hurt us on the scoreboard. We won that game comfortably. So if they can start converting a little bit of this into getting the ball first out a bit more often with the clearances, would be sort of the next step to getting that midfield unit working well and getting us first use of the ball.
Yeah, perfectly said. I think they all tie into each other. So getting the hands on the ball from the ruck is one part, but then doing something with that is the key. And that kind of comes with a fair amount of practice within that takes the entire midfield, including the ruckmen, to kind of put that together, just kind of feeling where each other are and everything like that. So pretty good line there from Laddams, at least heading in the right direction. Any other players that didn't get any biscuits in the Bob medal, but you wanted to point out as having a good game?
We had a couple, and I think this means, before we go on to them, is that Ollie Florent, welcome to Finland, mate. It would be lovely to see you. So if you come in October, your season's done by then. Even if we win the flag, you'll be in party mode. You're welcome to come over. Usually our grand finals in October. We're a 3-team league, so there's a good chance that the Dockers are going to be in there again. We're in there more often than not, but it's often a case of numbers. So yeah, come over in October. It'll be pretty warm still, like probably Melbourne winter weather in October in Finland, if you're lucky.
Oh,
maybe
fascinating! That sounds awful, but go on.
Yeah, it is. And it'll be getting dark. the leaves will everything be grey. It'll be wonderful. We play indoors actually in October. We don't play outdoors now. We play in a giant. Well, actually, he'll be used to it because their new super centre in Moore Park at the showground has got an indoor field, so he's actually going to be quite used to the conditions. So welcome, Ollie. We're looking forward to that.
There you go. Ollie gets self-expensed trip out to Finland. Good stuff by the Bob.
We'll even let you wear the number 13. We'd previously retired our number 13 because our former captain Juhis was wearing the 13, but we'll let you wear it just for the one game.
There you go.
Anyway, I thought Rowbottom was great. He took a lot of tackles. He's not getting as much of the footy, but he's putting a lot of pressure on players, and that doesn't get recognised enough probably, but he was really, really hard at it. And then the backline, like we said before, I mean, Rampy and Lloyd as the elder statesman really stood up and led that backline with the McCartans both injured. Robbie Fox came in, very well chosen sub, as it turned out, came in and slotted in nicely. Blakey was electric when he had the ball, and all of this is part of my broader apology to Tom McCartan after being so garbage of his best on ground last week, and people telling me that I should give more respect to key defenders because they're important players, and I agree with you. So what I've done is I've made a list of my favourite Swans fullback for every decade that they've been in Sydney. So number one,
wow, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. See if you can guess them. Number one, I've got Rod Rocket Carter. Played almost 200 games, or just over 200 games for the Swans and a bunch of games for Fitzroy. Only kicked one goal in 300 games, but he was a solid fullback in the 80s for the Swans, and also has done some great work for AFL in New South Wales in his post-football career. So Rod Rocket Carter from the 80s, Andrew Dunkley from the 90s, the fullback of the grand final that we didn't win against North in 96. He was a favourite of mine as a kid. Leo Barry, you star from the 2000s, or the double O decade, I should call it, whatever it's called. The next
Naughties,
decade, the noughties, yep, the tens, if that's a thing, the teens. The teens, I've got Teddy Richards, another
yeah, beautiful. I was
premiership
going to say.
fullback, and then this current decade, Tom McCartan, number one. So there you go. That's my apology complete.
All right. Well, fair enough. All right. Tom McCartan's gotten the biscuits for 3 years into the 20s.
Fullback of the partial decade.
Obviously, Finland's copped a lot of hate mail heading in your direction. So
the post they're on strike, they can't handle the volume. They've actually had to. They're only delivering 3 days a week. Yeah.
Let's put this snow, hold them up. Yeah, there you go. So fair enough. Well, let's get stuck into the post game. Injuries. Let's get straight off the bat. Paddy McCartan, Tommy McCartan, both with concussions. Now, the big talking point, of course, is the Paddy McCartan piece. There's talk about him being retired by the AFL because of the potential he has to injure himself. And this is some opinion that's been given out before he's even had the conversation with the doctors. At least we don't know what the conversation with the doctors are. But you'd have to imagine, Stevo, that this would be a fair comment by most, given, you got to protect the player from themselves in some cases. What do you see there? Because the way I look at it, obviously your life and your health going forward is more important than any footy game. So it wouldn't surprise me if we may have seen Paddy out there for the last time. What's your position on it?
Yeah, it might be the case. Then, like from the outside, and this goes to the media, it goes to anyone who's making comments on this sort of stuff, is you don't really know what's going on. The people who do is him and the people closest to him and the football club. And if people outside are distressed and sad by this, then McCartan and the family, etc., are a million times on top. So I think that we just give him some space to make some difficult conversations and eventually decisions, and just respect whatever comes out of it. That's where I'm at, I think.
Yeah, that's really fair comments. There's not a whole lot we can do as fans aside from send them our love. We just know that we want to see them on the ground only if it makes sense, and to protect them as much as we can. It also puts in an enormous dagger in the heart, just given how well he's done with coming back to the AFL, and of course playing with his younger brother there in the back line. That's been so solid. Just the storylines write itself, and they're not fun to really bring up. It's awful. It's an awful time for Swans fans to feel it. I personally feel so frustrated, and I don't know. Just I struggle to put words about how I feel emotionally about Paddy potentially playing this last game. And I think it's not going down well in Swans fandom out there. There's a lot of very frustrated, confused fans of not sure which direction to head in. So let's get straight into it then. With Paddy out potentially for good, and with Tommy out at least for one more week at the very least, we've got massive selections ahead of us. What do you see as being the way to plug in those holes if we see Paddy probably not playing anymore and knowing that Tommy comes back in 1 or 2 weeks?
I guess the most likely, we talked about this quite a bit since Saturday when it happened, that they both were clearly not going to play at least next week. Because one thing we do know is that neither of them are playing next week, and that's as far as we can sort of speculate with any confidence in the future. We know that. So next week against Richmond, Tom Lynch is out. We know that. He's injured. So he's not going to be up there, their giant 2-meter star full forward. Probably Aaron Francis has been playing in the reserves. He probably comes in, and then Fox probably stays in, and that's your 22. That's probably the most likely, I would think, just given who else is in the pipeline that we talked about last week. We don't really have a huge list of people to put in there. I mean, one of them is Will Gould. He's been groomed as a key defender for several years now. But then, as you said, you've been watching the reserves. He hasn't been doing that well in the reserves. Do you bring him in just because, or does someone like Fox come in and play taller? That would be the decision.
Yeah. So let's stick into the Gould situation. Like I said last week, we've watched the VFL games. He's not been lighting anything up like he did last year. So, and one of the points that we brought up with Noddy on the preseason chat about, is this the year we see Will Gould? We'll suggest it has to be. but the circumstances would have to see where and how. If he rolls into the team now with Paddy being out from injury and Will himself not playing the best football, heading back home to Adelaide to play in the gather round, where he's from Adelaide originally, the storyline writes itself, but we're also kind of setting him up to fail. If he's not playing that well and he's not at his optimum and not, we weren't going to select him anyway for the back line, then just throwing into that back line with no AFL experience to be in a key position and not being, not in form anyway at the moment, it stresses me out. It basically stresses me out because what if he comes in and doesn't play well? Like, is that his career? Because the timing was bad and we couldn't work it out, and we weren't gutsy enough to probably hold him back. I don't know. Like, it's a hard selection for the coaches because every single Swans fan and their dog is asking for Will Good to get some time on, and frankly, he's not earned it yet. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. I want to see him on the pitch, yeah, but maybe I don't know if this week is the right week for it. I agree with you. I think Francis is way more developed as an AFL player than anyone else is, including maybe Melican would be the other name you might throw in there.
Is he fit or is
in
he
the back line.
still injured? Because he missed the VFL last week, didn't he? And then they had a bye this
Yeah.
week, so we don't know if he's fit or not, do we? If he's fit,
No,
then
we
maybe he
don't.
comes in.
Yeah, and then the other one, of course, is McLean. Do we want to trial McLean being a bit more of a swingman, given that it looks like Amati's holding his spot down in that front line? So, a couple of questions. I mean, let's just finish off the Will Gould chat maybe to begin with. That's my position on it. I would prefer not to have him in the team if it means that we're basically throwing him in just because we need to throw him in. If that's the case, then so be it. Fine. But we need to lay out some KPIs for him, like get out there, compete as best you can. We're not expecting you to be a pure replacement of Paddy McCartan immediately, but you got to go out there and just do the bare bones stuff, one-on-one stuff really well. That's what I see. And even then, I do expect him have a couple goals scored on him, a couple mistakes to be made in that key spot. It's a freaking hard spot to be in. And we can't have Swans fans clambering up to get him on the field and then him not play a good game, and then we just start slamming him and suggest that he should be gone. So he needs time in that spot. He might get it now because we just have necessity. I thought it was going to be Rampy with injury that might, force our hand to kind of roll him in, but Francis is well ahead of him. So I don't see how he gets a spot. What's your take? Just to kind of wrap up the Will Gould chat.
Yeah, I think most likely. I mean, the Swans tend to be like in the whole Longmire period. The Swans have tended to be fairly conservative at selection table, so that's why my guess is that probably it's going to be just a simple Fox stays in the 22. Francis comes in. At least with the defence, we can talk about the other parts of the field later because there's also been people chatting about that. But with Gould, yeah, I mean, and maybe that's just what he needs. I mean, because you always want to bring a young guy in when they're ready, not when you're desperate and you've got nothing else. But then maybe sometimes if that's the only way to get an opportunity is that you're desperate and got nothing else and you throw them in and they do rise to the occasion. So maybe if for whatever reason he does get thrown in there, that he just stands up and all of a sudden we've got a good AFL player in, 18 months. We don't know. We will never know if he never gets on the field. That's the one thing we can be sure of. And until he's running around for the Crows in their premiership in 5 years when they finish their rebuild. But I don't know. I'd like to see him play, but he doesn't quite seem like he's next in line yet, does he?
No, definitely Francis, I think, is ahead of him. So we'll probably see, Foxy stay in there, Francis jump in for someone else, and at best go for emergency. But given the lackluster games, the last two games, and not necessarily because of the defeats. Defeats are going to be fine. You play well, you get beaten, so be it. That's fine. But we do have some questions around the ground generally. So there's heads there to be temporarily chopped, if that's a saying. One of the things that's been criticised a fair bit, and even from myself, given how much I do love Juzzy. Juzzy has not been lighting it up. He's getting his odd touches on the ball and he's helping out a lot in defence and he's really working on his defensive game. He's showed signs last year that he's very, very good at it. But he has not really had the impact and he's been shirking contests for what I can see. So I've got question marks over McInerney. And here's my theory of what we should do there. last week you would have heard me say that I wasn't sure about Errol being in the midfield, in the inside side. I am doubling down on that. I still believe that Errol's best position is closer to a wing, half back, half forward than it is on the inside, at least at this part of his career. I found him not making a huge impact on the inside, but when he did have the ball on the outside, he was very good with it. He made some great kicks, moved the ball well. He's a smart player. He's got all excellent skill sets, and we love him dearly. And I just don't think we're getting the best out of him by being in that midfield, mate. I'm doubling down on that. Do you want to talk me off the ledge, or do you
I
want to
can
push me?
try.
I'm not sure.
I can do. I'm not going to push you. I can certainly try. What I really think. I mean, he's only been a couple of matches now in this sort of inside outside role, and I looked at his possessions. He got 20 touches on the weekend against Port. Of his 20 touches, 8 were contested, 12 were uncontested from Goulden. So he's getting a split between contested and uncontested ball, and I think a midfielder who can play inside and outside is a really, really powerful thing to have. And it might take a bit of time to develop him in that. But if by the end of the year or by early next year, he goes to being a 25 plus a week possession midfielder who's getting half his ball inside and half his ball outside, we'll have a very damaging player. And it might just take a bit of time for him to get into that role, because even on the weekend he had a big impact. Like, I looked at his rankings in some of the key stats. He was first in goal assists, he was second in tackles, he was second inside 50s, he was second in centre clearances, and the only people getting more uncontested possessions than him were the outside runners. It was Florence, Stevens, Lloyd. Mills had one more than he did, and McInerney. So he's getting that balance. It's just a matter of maybe building up more experience in that role, because he's been playing in a different role the last couple of years of his career. Yeah, so I think persevere with him doing that and see how it works.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. Look, you're making pretty good points. The stats kind of back it up as well. I guess what I'm just working through my eyes here. I'm not entirely convinced as yet, but having said that, there is definitely something to be said with his skills, his brains. He is picking up things quickly. Maybe we persevere. And I guess here's the real question though. Like, what do we do with that spot? Who goes in the inside then? Do we have anyone at AFL level ready to just throw into the midfield mix? I don't think we do. I mean, we're already using Papley a fair amount in that centre clearance, but his best position is, of course, a small climbing forward. Who else would we throw into that midfield if I got my wish and had Errol move out to the wing or so?
I mean, probably
Maybe
Rowbottom
Sheldrick or so.
goes back in, because Rowbottom has been getting a lot less footy the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He's been getting, he's still getting his tackles and his pressure and all that, but he's not getting as much of the ball. So maybe he goes and spends more time in there. And then if Goulden does come out, as you suggest, then we've got 2 young wingers that are going to be displaced, because like McInerney and Stevens, they're both really young. They're both 22. I looked up their games, and I think there's always this thing that, like, you want them to be maybe ahead of where they're at, and then I compared them to Melbourne's wingers, and Melbourne has a pair of genuinely elite wing players in Hunter and Langdon.
Best in the comp, I think. Yeah, they're incredible.
They're amazing. So our 2 are both 22 years old. McInerney's played 57 games. Stevens has played 34. They're 2. Hunter has played 28. So Hunter is 28 years old, 177 games. Langdon's 27, 136. So I think if you take these 2 and fast forward them 3, 4, 5 years, then we can start to hopefully see something of that sort of quality. But it is probably not quite there yet. Wing's hard. It's one of the hardest positions to play, I think, on the wing. It's really, really difficult. It's thankless a lot of the time. A lot of the work you do on the wing, no one cares. If you don't get 25 touches, everyone thinks you had a bad game. You know, it's a tough position. You're a lot of selfless running on a wing to open up space and in transition, and your running patterns are very important. It takes them a long time to learn that, these young wingers. So I'm not one of the ones who wants to cast them to the VFL. I think keep them in there, and they're the future. These 2 guys are the future, you know, and Goulden, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. My opinion to try to get I don't know, to try to see the best that we can do with Errol probably aligns him with maybe stepping out for at least portions of the game. At least not starting there and rolling into the centers occasionally where it makes sense. But of course, that then requires someone on the wing or half back or half forward to kind of be cycling through with him. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I struggle. I struggle with it a little bit. So we'll see what Horse decides to do there. I mean, okay. So
Yeah,
there's
and
Errol's
it's a tough
positioning.
balance. So
Yeah.
just on that, it's a tough balance for Longmire, I think, too, because he's got a team which everyone's expecting to compete for a premiership, but he's also trying to develop a list at the same time.
Mm.
Um, and getting games into these young guys, it's a process, and they're going to be up and down when they're that young.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Fair enough. Fair enough. Like Adil has come leaps and bounds in the last year. Juzzy is pretty good and has had games where I've just looked at him and gone, that was a perfect game by him. Even if he didn't, he collects like 10 touches or whatnot, but just the effort to get around the ground. Every one of those touches were purely link up play to get us propelling forward. Like and he goes in the back line. He's the first to get to the back line for extra help. Always, if you watch the games again, so that's not easy to be doing. Like he's got to be running super hard, get himself in position. He's under a lot of pressure to make kicks and move the ball forward, and he's getting it done. But yeah, he's not playing his best football, and but I don't. He's too good for VFL. If he did roll down in VFL, he's not rolling down there for weeks on end. He's there to take a break or to work on one specific thing and then bounce straight back again. There's no way that he is VFL level. He's absolutely AFL level, but just not maybe firing off his message you want. While we're at that subject, I guess, Heaney. A lot of criticism about Heaney's game in the first 3 weeks. And this game, I felt he was a lot better, getting hands on the ball, getting amongst it a bit more, having a couple shots. Yeah, what did you think of Heaney's game there?
Yeah, he had that one really disappointing miss, didn't he? Which you
Yeah.
tend to remember these highlights rather than everything else I did. Yeah, definitely. And he's a very good player. And if he's in a slump, he'll get out of it. It's just a matter of waiting for him to get out of it and how long it takes. But he was in the All Australian team last year.
Yeah.
He's a very good player.
Yeah. I see. I I understand the criticism because I'd be given it. There's no doubt about it. But I do think that he's playing today. Sorry, on Saturday was a lot better. It was a big improvement. And I did see him rolling to the mids a fair few times and also get some touches that way. So maybe just playing him back in the form at this point is the way to go. But he looked better. He looked better this week. I saw a couple of beautiful marks that he took.
Mm.
So that's a big part of his game. So to see him flying and getting a couple of marks against opponents in doing something that few people will be able to do in that contest is pretty nice. So that's better, mate. The other one who's copped a lot of criticism just generally over his whole career, but in particular the last week or so, and definitely last few days, is Buddy. Buddy's game on the weekend looked very dull. He wasn't moving that well. He was shut down by a defender. He was cheating and causing free kicks going the other way, which he typically does do. He gives away a fair few, but these ones looked a lot more desperate. He wasn't getting around so well. There's basically calls for Buddy to hang up the boots now after this game. What do you see? What are you looking at here?
I don't think he should retire, but I think that they're probably going to have to think about exactly what sort of role he plays on the field, especially against these teams that do have a dominant key defender that can just make him almost irrelevant on the field, which we've seen a
Mm.
bit lately. Um, maybe free him up a bit, throw him further up the field, let him roam through the half forward and the wing. I mean, he could terrorize people up and down a wing. Still, he's still an amazing
Yeah.
athlete. Yeah, but maybe we just don't have the key forward Buddy Franklin anymore, and it's a matter of thinking about his role. But I still think, even at worst, he's still a very, very smart guy who's a very hard person to match up on in different parts of the field. So I wouldn't be telling him to quit.
Yeah.
But maybe they do need to rethink his role.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Look, I don't know how much more football he's got in him. I imagine that this may be his last or second last season that he ever plays. But one of the KPIs we've kind of repeated here in the bevy is to make sure that we're not being so dependent on Buddy having to bail us out by kicking two or three or four out of nowhere, in quick succession that he does sometimes do. We do need to see what the future looks like with Logan and Papley, Hayward, Heaney in those positions. But as we mentioned before, they're not kicking straight either. No one aside from Logan is kind of looking as solid in that front line right now. Heaney will bounce back. He's a good player. Hayward will find more opportunities to goal. So he'll kind of climb out. We know Papley's got a lot of excitement all around the ground, and Amadi's just starting off. So there's a lot of questions to be asked about what we do in that space. Do you look at replacing him, or at least managing him, Stevo, for this coming week, heading over to Adelaide?
Franklin this week. No,
Yeah.
I reckon that Franklin, being the competitive beast that he is, that we've seen for his whole career, like decade and a half career, whatever it is, I
Mm.
reckon he's going to go over to Adelaide ready to tear Richmond a new one,
Hmm.
and he'll run amok.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think he does respond to what happens outside the field, doing it on the field. So fingers crossed for a big buddy game where he comes out just firing off to shut up some of these criticism that he's got at the moment on him, even if it is a chunk of it coming from Swans fandom as well.
Mm,
I don't see how he is still unbelievably good. We still depend on him too much going inside 50. One of the points you raised in the stats there was that we had our inside 50s were brilliant, through the roof in numbers wise, but the quality of them, or at least the ability for our forwards to get their hands on them before the opponents did, was very poor, and it's not been good. A part of that could be attributed to, kicking it to Buddy when he's got a 2-on-1 going on and him screaming for the ball. I mean, if he's screaming for the ball coming towards you, it's hard not to kick it in his direction. He's done it for a long time, but it's kind of gotten to a stage now that our guys need to, lift their heads up and look for opportunity wherever they are, not just to the guy, the veteran with over 1,050 goals in him. We've got to sort out a way to make something of it. So Buddy is a problem for our team and just what we can do with him. I think, I don't know. Mate, any other axe swinging you want to do, or questions we want to raise at this stage?
nah, I'm more conservative with this always with
Mm,
selections. There's already two forced outs, so that's already two more coming in that weren't there that bring a bit of fresh energy and opportunity for people, and and then you don't want to mess too much with stability either. If
mm.
guys just didn't have their best day, what does that tell them if you drop them every time they don't play out of their skins? Then you can go the other way and you can make people look over their shoulders, and it's hard to play well. So I'd
Yeah,
probably just have the two, unless there's another one like a forced change, like an injury or someone needs a rest, which we never know from the outside. But it'd
yeah,
be
yeah,
those
yeah.
two out.
Yep, fair enough. Fair enough there. Yep. Any other changes around the field wise? I mean, Harry Cunningham, Mr. Dependable, was practically nowhere to be seen in the game as well. I think he only had 2 or 3 touches all up, playing in a new role up forward, and then he rolled back to help out with the back line. Do you see any changes with Mr. Dependable, Harry Cunningham?
This is these role players, and this is why I'm always reluctant to be too like bullish when it comes to dropping players or whatever. Because with the role players, you never know what their role is, except for the coaches and the team. We have no idea what they wanted him to do. Maybe he did it
Mm,
perfectly, he just didn't get the footy, but it didn't matter. Like, or maybe he was terrible and he should be dropped. We have no idea. But
yeah,
but yeah, if he's playing a defensive role, it's really really hard, I think, for outsiders to even guess whether he did his job. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that because he's reliable and they know that you can rely on him to do a job, he's probably got quite a lot of credits in the bank to stay in the team.
Yeah, he's been someone who's been really good for us in the past. He's won a couple of games out of just smart execution from the mid or the back line there, wherever he's been, putting the ball in the right places. To give some numbers out there for everyone outside for a bit of context, he had 3 touches over the weekend, with one of those being a kick and 4 tackles. Um, so not really lining up any stages, but as Steve was suggesting there, in that position, we've also had guys like Bell and Wicks in the past, and people have been asking for their heads when they aren't getting their 25 touches or so. So, but the tackle count was high for them, and the pressure acts were high, and that's what we needed that extra position for. So it sounds like the way that I see the game is being played at the moment, that Harry is filling in that role and seems to be the best person for it at the moment, with Wicks out for injury, Bell being traded out, and us trying to get some more game time into guys like Roberts, Sheldrick, a couple of ones that are probably knocking on the door for AFL selection. He's just ahead of them just because he's done it for such a long time consistently. So one bad game, or at least a couple of like what looks on paper statistically as not great games, doesn't necessarily paint all the picture, as you're saying there, Stevo. But yeah, I dare say it's hard to drop Cunningham just given how consistent he's been with us for as long as he has. And now with the back line in a bit of struggle position, we probably need him more than ever if he does. They do decide to kind of swim him back down to help out with that back line and sharpen it up a bit. So yeah, probably nothing else. There any other selection ideas you have at all?
The one thing I have been thinking a bit during the week, it feels like it's been a week. God, since Saturday.
Like it's been 10 days. Yeah,
These
been
long
2
weekends,
nights.
man. I'm exhausted. I want to go back to work. I'm so tired from these days off. It's doing me to bits. I was wondering with Franklin and Heaney, because they're both out of sorts, right?
Yeah.
If there's a problem, I mean, the problem's not the players. They're both elite footballers. And I'm really just sort of thinking as I talk here, talking as I think. But if you could sort of merge their roles or switch their roles somehow, like, maybe give Heaney more time as that one-out player in the goal square where he's going to be too strong for his defender, and give Franklin a bit more time, like way up the field, like, well onto the wing and through the middle of the ground, and use those two, both of the two, in a slightly varied way, and see how it goes. Because what they had last week didn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad shout, to be honest with you. I like the way that Logan's moving around the field. He's dragging guys away from the middle. I think he's got given it KPIs. Like, all right, if you're not going to be impacting the footy, then at least impact the inside 50. Go out there, drag a couple players off, but he's not dominant enough to warrant having their best defender on him yet. So we're kind of getting there, but he's looking very, very good for being so damn young. But yeah, maybe that's a good shout to get Heaney up forward, high forward, and to see him outrun, outmark some of the other backs there. That's not a bad shout at all. That could be something we do that. Well, look, mate, let's get stuck into next week's game. We're already kind of deep into the potty, so let's see how we go here. Next week is celebration round, where we presumably celebrate the fantastic hair that is on top of Gil McLaughlin's head out there in Adelaide, of all places. So where the entire AFL is going to be played out of Adelaide and Adelaide Oval over the weekend, which is an interesting idea. They do it in footy. They call it, what do they call it? They call it, I don't know, something round. I don't know. Who cares? But they call it something where they all play all their games out of one particular stadium. So all the fans turn up. Of course, it's going to be Brisbane. But this time around, they're shooting it. The AFL is doing something similar and playing them all out of Adelaide. So we're playing the 12th place Richmond Tigers. It is an interesting one with the Tigers. They've actually lost Lynch out to their key forward, out for suspension and injury for a broken foot. So although he was suspended, he would have been sitting out anyway because of that injury. So far in the season, the Tigers have drawn against Carlton in that very first game, which was a pretty poor game to watch, to be fair. They won over the Crows, and they've lost to both the Magpies and the Bulldogs in the consecutive weeks. Stevo, what do you see from the Tigers here?
They haven't been impressive, but then again, we come up against a team like we did against Port that really needs a win, and they do. They really need a win because a lot of people were talking the Tigers up as sort of a top 4 or at very least top 8 team, and they haven't played like it yet. And now they've lost their gun forward, so they're going to be fired up. And this is the first of a string of quite a few tough games. I mean, up until the bye in a month and a half, we've got Richmond, we've got Geelong in Geelong. We've got the Giants, we've got Collingwood at MCG, we've got Fremantle at home, North Melbourne away, and they're resurgent with some confidence, and then Carlton at home. That's seven tough games. Swans are 2-2 right now. If we want to be 7-4 at the end of that block of games coming into the bye round, we can only afford to drop 2 of those games. This is one of the ones the Swans can absolutely not afford to drop. It's a must-win game.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, the Tigers in a general sense have a good side, and they've got some decent mids that they've poached from the AFL nursery in GWS. Taranto, there's another gentleman there. Oh my goodness. Hopper. There you go, Jacob Hopper. How can you bolster up stocks by bringing those two guns in at their prime? Nice work, AFL. So they've got a good team around. I it's not convincing at all that we've kind of got the better of them. Having their players, so Revolt was managed last week. We don't know whether injury or effort or whatnot, or whether this is something part of just his management of a player and he's managing his body. But he sat out. Cochin was also placed as the super sub for this week and ended up getting some game time. So we got those two, key positions, and they're veterans in those spots as not playing too much football, maybe being managed for particular games. And you see Lynch go out, as we mentioned there, for injury. So it's not really a whole lot to be said other than they're in the same position as us, where they've got a key position they need to fill in, and they've got a bunch of players that aren't playing to their standard. So both teams have got a lot to play for. Anything else to add to that there, Steve?
Yeah, and they've got some really good runners too. I mean, they cover the
Mm,
ground really well. They've got some players who like to get free inside forward 50. So the midfield can't. I mean, Lynch out does make a big difference, but Revolt, even in his final probably season this year, is still a very very good forward and a very strong
mm,
target for them. He's still one gun forward more than most AFL teams have, really. Um, so they've got so the Swans have just got to really not let their midfield run rampant and just put it down the throat of their tall forward in Revolt, and then all of their small half forward type flankers and forward pockets that
mm.
could bury us really if we let them get away.
Yep. No, fair enough. Fair enough. They do have the pieces of the puzzle there. I just don't know where they are at. But at the same time, I feel the same thing with us.
Mm.
One thing I want to quickly mention that I probably didn't at the beginning was the umpiring on the weekend. I'll point out a couple of moments, mate, and you can tell me whether you feel that was correct or not. The first one that I will bring up would be the deliberate goal by Port Adelaide when it was running back. I think it was Logan kind of closest to him, ran through the sticks and was called for a deliberate behind. The way I looked at it, I'm going to put myself out there. It was not, that shouldn't have been a free kick. He had enough pressure on him within 5 meters of Logan holding him up, and he had no other option, easy options to go. So he ran through that behind post. What do you think? Do you think that was a good call or bad call or indifferent?
I agree. That one was harsh because I think what happened is that McDonald was really close to the Port defender and then saw that he was going to take it through. And then McDonald just sort of stopped. And then it
Mm,
made it look like there was a huge gap and less pressure. But up until the very last moment, the Port player surely thought that he had someone breathing down his neck. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done that, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't like that one. I would have very happily seen that not be a free kick.
Yeah, fair enough. And the other one that comes to mind is Laddams being called for play on. I don't know on the ground. It seemed like not everyone saw it because, of course, it's hard to see if you're not watching it on telly. But that one really shook me. I was like, that was not a play on in any given day of the week, and I'd suggest that 99% of Swans fans and AFL fans generally would believe it. What did you see from that? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I only saw it like live in the game, but it didn't look like it, did it?
No.
I mean, maybe he takes a step off his line, but you'd have to be right behind him. But it didn't look like it, surely. Like, and
Yeah. No. And
no,
that's the thing. It cost us a goal, and
uh,
that's the other. Paul Adams also last week copying a free kick right in front of goal as well in the ruck contest. The guy was in front of him. He put his hands out, and it just so happened that guy's head was there, and he didn't hit him at all. He just kind of hit him on the shoulder, and they caught a free going the other way, which cost him a goal. So Paul Adams is trying to do his absolute best by being the good lad this year, and the umpires are not helping him out. They scored at least two on him so far from just bad calls. So, yeah, I feel for him, but the umpiring this week wasn't great. Was it 2 points in our direction? I dare say not. I think we won the free kicks counts clearly by plus 10 in free kicks,
yeah,
but
okay,
the quality of them is different. But we could have played better to win it. Honestly, the umpires didn't make a difference in this one.
no, I
It
don't
was it
think so.
was it was geared 50.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of last minute things, mate. Yeah, you got some news about the AFLW coach Scott Gowan, sorry.
Yeah, we heard this week that Scott Gowans he was diagnosed with prostate cancer during the week. He's apparently they've said that he's going to make a full recovery, but he's going to go through surgery. So through his treatment and recovery, just wish him well through all of that. And as he said, he's come out in the media and said, please go and get your checks if you're in a group that is susceptible to that. Please go and get checked, because it was a check for something else that got it for him, and if it had been left, then
Mm.
it could have been much worse. So please go and get them done.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things as men. It's the number one killer of men in cancer, prostate cancer. Yeah, we don't do a whole lot about it. We're terrible at being honest and going to the doctors and whatnot. So if you want to do the right thing by yourself, go and get yourself checked out, because it is an enormous killer of men. It is preventable if you catch it early. Women get their breast scanned all the time. So guys, go get your prostate checked. It's not that uncomfortable. And frankly, we should be doing it every single year. So if you're man enough, go get your freaking prostate checked. That's all I can say there.
Yep.
One last thing is, Mark on Twitter mentioned that he had worn socks that he wore on the grand final to this game as well. And Mark had suggested to the community whether he should be getting rid of his socks. And I did ask him to burn them, and he said he would. So, Mark, it's on you, mate. Thank you so much for putting it out there and letting the community make the decision. Feel free to send us footage of the socks burning somewhere safe, of course, and make sure you wear the right protection if they're toxic. But yeah, fair enough, Mark. You got to burn those socks. They're no good to us anymore. Get rid of them, burn them, take them out, dump them somewhere in the river, and let's move on to the next game where you've bought some new socks. So, Mark, thank you very much for that, mate. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. So on behalf of Bob, thank you very much for listening in. As always, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to like the channel and like this episode. It does go a long way. The AFL media for the Swans is not there. And so supporting your podcast, wherever they are and whoever they are, is very important to us all. But until next time, up the Bloods, and can you, Swannies?